I'm Marty Simpkins, and I'm here to tell you about the 28-year anniversary of the Beirut Memorial that happened on October 23, 1983. The Lebanese Civil War broke out in 1975. Here to talk more about the Lebanese Civil War is Professor Don Habibi of University of North Carolina in Wilmington.
The reasons for the Civil War was that the Lebanese state was created with a certain kind of balance based on a census of the population, I'm thinking in the 1920s or so. And basically it gave, Christians had a sort of parity demographically with Muslims. The Sunni Muslims and the various Christian groups, they shared power. And that worked fairly well, but there are certain forces working against that. One of them is a theological position that non-Muslims shouldn't rule over Muslims. And so with hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in Lebanon, that also shifted the demographic balance further, so that by 1975 it breaks out into a civil war, which lasts for 15 years.
Here to talk about her own experience in Lebanon during the Civil War is Ani Simpkins, who was there when it started.
First thing I remember, things started changing. I remember schools, we used to go to school, and then next thing we know, the next day it used to be closed, and we always wondered why. And then we found out that there was a war going on. I was only about 10 years old, I guess, back then, when it started, and then I remember the soldiers coming to our school and telling us that this kid have to get out of here because there's going to be some bombing going on around here, and we don't want anybody getting hurt. When we went to bed, I used to hear the bombs going off. One night, my dad came and picked me up. It was in the middle of the night. He was carrying me, and I woke up, and I looked at him, and I said, well, what is going on? He said, we have to go and all the way down in the basement because they're going to be bombing around here. So we need to go into safety. Which, in our basement over there, we lived in a condo, so there was no really basement. So what it was sort of like a rat hole type place. There was water there and everything. I remember we had to go down there and wait for about an hour or so it was. We just stood there just scared to death till we realized that the noises had stopped, then we came back upstairs. So it was scary, and then there were times when we went to bed and we woke up in the morning and we used to find a lot of shells right there on our balcony, empty shells and everything, and we used to collect that. I remember that a lot of times that we used to play outside all the time and we couldn't anymore, so we had to stay inside a lot. And then I also remember when the bombing stopped, my dad took us into Beirut, because we lived in the suburbs of Beirut. He took us into Beirut to see all the places that were bombed. So there's a lot of buildings that were all, tore down and, from the bomb, all destroyed, and, the shops all deserted, so it didn't even look like the beautiful country that we used to know. So.
At the U.S. Embassy bombing on April 18, 1983, a van carrying explosives crashed into the building. 63 people were killed, including 17 Americans, 1 Marine soldier, and 1 American journalist. On October 23, 1983, the Marine Barracks bombing occurred. Marine soldiers were killed in the bombing, which is the most single death toll in one day for the U.S. Marines since Iwo Jima of World War II. Along with the 220 Marine soldiers, 18 Navy personnel were killed, 3 Army soldiers were killed, and 60 other Americans were injured. What do you first remember from that day? Where were you? What was the situation like around you?
Yeah, I remember it very well. I was in Ithaca, New York. I was in graduate school. It was a Sunday. And I remember hearing the news Sunday morning. And so there was sort of reports of a bombing and casualties. We didn't know the number, but as the day went on, the numbers grew. This was very bad news. Yeah. Very sad, very tragic. They weren't fighting, they were essentially sleeping, and it was a suicide bomber. And as I recall, the Marine sentry saw the truck, and shot at it, but it didn't matter. Once, the truck loaded with bombs made its way past the first barrier, it had only to crash into the building, and it was a very powerful explosion that it basically brought this whole building down.
In your own experience, what was the first thing you remember about the bombing in Beirut in 1983?
First, I was pretty young at the time when the bombing happened. Even though I was always very politically aware, this was something I hadn't really thought a lot about. Terrorism was not something big at that point in time in history. Really, the big thing that dominated the news for us was the Cold War. So this was something that was new. It was shocking, and none of us really knew or understood what to make of it. We understand.
The Marine barracks was destroyed during the Lebanese Civil War when 2 truck bombs crashed into 2 buildings housing both U.S. and French military forces, who were members of the multinational force in Lebanon. After the bombing, the Palestine Liberation Organization withdrew their forces from the International Peacekeeping Force. The Beirut Memorial was built in 1988 through the funds of the citizens here in Jacksonville and through others around the world. This granite wall bears the names of the 271 military servicemen who died during the 2 car bombings. Between the 2 granite walls stands a 6-foot bronze statue of a Marine soldier. The man standing here is Moro Zani, who is an assistant scoutmaster. He's with his son, Alexander, and his friend, Sean. Moro Zani is a former Marine soldier who served in Beirut and then was pulled out in 1982. Some of the men's names written on this wall, Zani knew. As the American people remember the day, October 23rd, let us not forget the soldiers who served in Beirut, trying to maintain peace in a foreign nation through their intervention. In your own words, describe how you feel about the United States military intervening in other countries' wars.
Military intervention in wars, it depends on the centrality of the conflict to our interests. Does the conflict have some direct relationship to our interests? The United States tends to understand the military is, 1, an expensive tool to use, and 2, is a difficult tool to wield in the international system.
The Beirut Memorial stands for something more than America's intervention, but it also stands for a time when nations come together to settle their differences to achieve world peace. It stands as a symbol that America will always be there to not only keep peace within their own country, but peace around the world. On this day, October 23rd, we do not wish to celebrate the 28th anniversary of the bombing of Beirut, but to remember those who fought and served to maintain world peace and unity. America remembers the troops who served, and the ones who continue to serve to this day. I'm Marty Simpkins reporting for the Lebanese Watcher.